The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to the Keefer and Kurre. It's funny because we record both these shows early in the week, and I listen to Need to Know, and it runs right there on TKR. So if you're listening to the show right now, you know the Keefer and Kurre usually runs right afterwards. And of course, if you're looking for us on podcast, you can see it wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We're available everywhere. Your numbers, by the way, have really taken off, and I don't know if it's because Donald Trump won the nomination or won the presidential nomination or the inauguration. I don't know what it is, but people are really into your politics. So kudos to you, and that's why I'm so happy to have you on the Tony Kurre Radio Network of a podcast and radio stations. But I've got I'm so blessed to not only do a TV show with you, and of course we do the starting lineup 10:30, 11 o'clock. We talk sports. But also, I get to talk a lot of rock and roll with you. I don't know anybody. I'm not saying I'm super smart when it comes to rock and roll. I've just been around a long time, and I hold on to that information, much like yourself. And so when I get to sit down and really talk to someone who knows what the hell they're talking about when it comes to rock and roll, it's really eye opening. Because if I just go walk into a restaurant and start trying to have a conversation with somebody, I don't have a clue what the hell they're talking about, and I want to talk about my kind of stuff. And I know you and I are on the same wavelength. You got me?
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm not really expert as much as far as the facts, and I'd like to know. I always want to learn more about the personalities, but I grew up in the classic rock era, and it was a huge part of my life and continues to be. With my social life being so underwhelming, let's put it that way. I spend a lot of time sitting here in my home theater just listening to classic rock, and it's still something that is one of my favorite things to do.
Well, I love it. And along with that, the top 25 are actually, I say the top 14, it should be 25, but the 2025 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees came out last week. Did you? Were you aware of that?
I think I did hear that. I have not scrutinized the list, so I'm at your service.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has got this really right. So rather than do nominations and then just right out of the chute, what they do is they do the group of nominations early in the year. Then they'll vote on it in April. So we're talking about it again in a couple of months. Then they'll have the nomination show in Cleveland, where they have all the bands show up and they actually do the thing. And then a couple months later, they'll run the show itself on television. So, I mean, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has done the college football kind of mantra, if you will. They have made something special about every 2 or 3 months out of the year. So we're talking about them all year long. And I love it. I think it's great.
I just hope they have a different selection committee.
Well, no doubt. Well, and it's interesting because there's 12,000 individuals that actually vote on these.
That's a pretty good committee.
And those are everyone from music directors, executive directors, record label people, artists themselves. There's a fan vote. That's crucial. The fans actually get to vote in one of their favorite bands, so they don't want to hear about it. And of course, I just want to get this out of the way. It is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's rock and roll. It doesn't mean Dolly Parton can't get in. Doesn't mean we can't have gospel music. It's rock and roll. It's a music mantra. It's rock and roll. So people go, I don't understand why they can put this band in because it's not rock and roll. Stop. Shut up. I don't care. It's right. It's music, but they couldn't call it the Music Hall of Fame. They had to start somewhere. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's music. So
I'm going to put Liberace in or somebody,
Exactly. Which could be Hackman. Liberace's not, but I mean, it could happen. So I've got 14 nominees.
All right.
I want to start by going one by one. And for me, regardless of whether it's baseball, NFL, or anything else, when someone says the Hall of Fame, it's the highest honor. Okay.
Absolutely.
It should be a no-brainer. If I have to stop and think for a minute, I don't normally want to vote that person. If I can go, if you have to talk me into it. Now, I can sit back and do a little more research and go, I really didn't think this person was really eligible, but now looking at their background of work, I can certainly understand why they'd be voted in. So I really want to get your facial expression and your initial. Have you heard any of these, by the way?
No, I have not. Okay, I knew a list had come out, but I had not seen them.
Perfect. So I'm going to throw them out at you, and then we'll talk about them a little bit, and then I want to get into bands that you think should be in the Hall of Fame that are not, and I've got a list of those too that I think will be remarkable because there's one band that I cannot believe is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and no one's talking about it.
Okay,
here we go. Number one, Billy Idol.
Okay.
Okay, you told me a lot. That's fine. That's fine. Let's get through them first. Chubby Checker.
Definitely.
Okay.
Should I vote or
no? Just you can say whatever you want after these.
All right,
say whatever you want. Bad Company.
I really like Bad Company. I would say yes.
Okay. Mana.
Who?
Good enough. The Black Crowes.
The Black Crowes, yes.
Oasis.
I don't think they're Hall of Fame material.
Mariah Carey.
Yeah, I don't like her style much, but she's definitely had a worthy career.
Yeah, Outkast.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Soundgarden.
It's really not my genre of music, but I know they were pretty huge, so I think they deserve some really serious consideration.
Fish.
Yeah, that's really not my genre. But Fish had some real notable achievements, and they're really interesting, and they're one of the few bands that were big enough initially. They've actually played a couple of gigs at the Sphere in Las Vegas, which is pretty impressive.
I got our good friend Dr. Rab, who does Dark Side of the Pooch, another one of the great shows we do here on Tony.
He's a Fish guy.
He is a huge Fish guy, and Fish is going to be playing the brand new amphitheater in downtown Birmingham next summer. So, or actually this summer. So we'll be checking that. Joe Cocker.
Yeah, Joe deserves to be in.
White Stripes.
I'm not real familiar with any White Stripe stuff. I'll defer to Tony Kurre on that one.
Okay, and Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah, she had enough hits. I think she probably definitely needs to be strongly considered.
All right, so I saw this list, and I just want to make a couple of acknowledgments while we go through it. Billy Idol, he's had one number one hit. He sang at the ceremonies last year. He sang "No More Tears" for Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne called Billy Idol an icon. I do think there's something very important here. If you are still relevant today, and your first effort had to come out at least 25 years ago. So in other words, if your first album came out in the year 2000, you're now good for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is hard to believe. He's in those commercials. I forget what the commercial is. Some Air Force something, the air guitar commercials. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think a lot of people even knew that he was still on tour and stuff. So he's still relevant. So I think that helps his cause. I'm not saying he's worthy. I'm just saying he's still out there.
And he was really good in the movie The Wedding Singer, an Adam Sandler movie. Yep. Remember on the plane, he actually sang to them or whatever, and helped defeat the bad guy with a stewardess's tray. So Billy stayed in the spotlight. So yeah, I think you're right. I think he deserves strong consideration.
Andy Spinozzi, my good friend, God rest his soul, great radio personality, just a super morning guy. Had a story about Billy Idol one night. They went out one night and sat in the back of a limo. Man, it was just a wonderful story. I'll share it with you sometime.
Nice.
Chubby Checker. This is only the second time he's been nominated. The first time he was nominated with Elvis Presley back in 1986. The question is, why has it been 39 years in between nominees? For example, Mariah Carey was nominated last year. Okay. Mariah Carey's got 19 number one hits. She's got 38 top 40 hits. She's just blowing it and going. The only reason she didn't get in last year is probably because they wanted to nominate some other people. We know she's going to get in. She's definitely just slam dunk. But this isn't Major League Baseball. This isn't like Derek Jeter getting in the first ballot. I mean, in Major League Baseball, you got to get in first ballot. That means something. Mariah Carey knows she's going to get in. But for some reason they didn't put her in last year. I don't know. There was, I think the Beatles, I think it was like the third Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nomination they were part of.
That's insane.
There's been some weird, and the Beatles definitely should get in. There's a couple of bands that have gotten the wash and then they know they're going to be in a couple of years later, but they just don't get, so I'm not sure how they vote. There's got to be, much like the committee in March Madness or the committee for college football, there's got to be some debate. There's got to be a reason why they're not doing this, because that's causes people to get pissed off. When people get pissed off, they talk about you. For example, Foreigner. Everyone kept saying Foreigner needs to get in. Foreigner. Well, they finally got in last year, but I mean, it was 6 or 7 years of people bitching and moaning, and finally put it up to a public vote and they got in. Bad Company, who's the next band, is that band this year. Everyone's like, if you ask anybody, including a guy who does a show here on my radio station, and Damon Johnson, who of course plays the lead guitar for Leonard Skinner, who's the greatest rock and roll voice ever, everyone says Freddie Mercury and Paul Rodgers is number two. Everybody says Paul Rodgers. So Bad Company should get in. My question is, Bad Company had a career with Paul Rodgers, and then Brian Howe came in 1986, and that's when the band got really mainstream and had the majority of their hits. The majority of hits of Bad Company were from 1989 and on after their Fame and Fortune album, so they could get in. I mean, they certainly should get in, but they'll be about Mana. The only reason I think Mana is in it, that's some Mexico pop band that started back in 1980.
I didn't want to admit my ignorance. I don't know who Mana is.
The only reason I think Mana is in here is because there's an urban contingency with Chubby Checker and Outkast, and I think they wanted to make it as eclectic as possible. Mana doesn't have a snowball's chance of hell getting into this, and I don't even know why they're in there, but it's interesting. I'm okay with them sprinkling in some nominees that don't make sense, but it's fun for us to talk about.
Well, we didn't follow up on Chubby Checker. Chubby Checker was more than just a musician with a couple of hits. Chubby Checker was a guy who created a transformative movement in music and dance that, I mean, it's one of the first memories I had. My parents were just crazy about the twist. I mean, it was just a huge deal. And it's literally, Tony's one of the earliest memories of my childhood. I probably was still a toddler and was familiar with the twist because they were playing the 45s at my house and they were jiggling their stuff, you know.
He probably he won't get his own wing. He won't get his own floor. He may not get his own corner, but Chubby Checker should be. It may be a Pete Rose kind of thing where I'm sure there's something in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame about Chubby Checker now. He's just not in. There's got to be something in there. And I've been up there 15 times. I don't remember seeing anything about Chubby Checker, but the twist. I mean, if you were around the 60s when that thing it took the entire. It was twerking times 20.
Well, that's when everything was changing, and he was one of the agents for major change with that iconic song that created a whole firestorm of activity. I mean, so I'm shocked that he's not already in.
Black Crow's still relevant. Chris and his brother are still beating the hell out of each other, but they're still touring, and I think that's good. Oasis. It's another band that, man, it seems like they're still back on the road too. They finally put their differences aside. I think if you are still on the road and it's still 25 or 30 years after your first album, I really think that helps your cause here. I think it really helps your relevancy. That's why I think Cyndi Lauper is a slam dunk. She has had, I think, 6 or 7 top 10s. You think about Girls Just Want to Have Fun. By the way, that was not a number 1. That was a number 2 hit.
Really?
Time After Time and True Colors were her only number 1 songs. But she's still on the road. She's still playing and people still love her. And when she gets out there and plays, you don't realize how many great songs she really had.
Yep, that's right.
She really did, including, of course, the duet she did with Frank Sinatra, of course, the Christmas song she did, which brought him back from the dead and had her sing along. So I think she's definitely in. Mariah Carey, mentioned her. I wrote down some of her numbers: 19 number 1 hits, 28 top 10s. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, if you have 1 top 10, you've made it. She's had 28, so there's no doubt.
Slam dunk.
Outkast, don't get it. Don't know if they're trying to make the black contingency happy. I'm not sure what the deal is. I don't know if they have to have a hip hop artist. They put Run DMC in there a couple of years ago. I don't know what the deal is. They've had 4 top 10 hits. I'm not sure. Soundgarden. I was at Chris Cornell's last show, or one of his last shows, in Tuscaloosa. I was there with Dr. Josh. We had done a show from there. We did a Curry and Claypool show live, and he got up, and I remember there was a huge amount of billowing of smoke. There was a pit area where it was general admission if you get in this area, and they were blowing smoke up on stage. And he came out and said, "Listen," he goes, "I'm glad you're having a good time, and I'm glad you're high as a kite, but please don't blow it up here because we can't even function with all this smoke." And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. And it was the first time that Soundgarden ever played the state of Alabama. And he said, "Listen, I never forget." He said, "I thoroughly enjoyed being here in your state, and I can't wait to come back." And of course, a month later, he'd killed himself.
Yep.
Fish, I think, is another one of those bands. It may be just too early for them to get in. Joe Cocker, got a chance to bring him on stage a couple of times. Always looks like he just got out of a washing machine.
He does.
Everything from Woodstock to You Are So Beautiful. The collaborations he did with Jennifer Warnes. I mean, he's definitely got to be in. Joe Cocker's got to be in. The White Stripes don't really know enough about them. I know from a gospel standpoint, and a lot of people love Jack White. They think that he should be in because of that. And then Cyndi Lauper I mentioned. So whenever they have these things, they always come out with these bands, and they say, well, what about these bands? Why aren't these bands in? The short list of bands, and I could really give a rat's ass whether these bands get in. The short list of the bands that got snubbed are Iron Maiden.
Okay, which I think is worthy.
I think it's worthy too because they changed. They only had one. It's just not about top 10 hits. It's about how you changed music. That's why people say Devo should be in, because they changed the way we listen to music. Without Devo, I don't think we have Goody Two Shoes. I don't think we have a lot of that British 90s Gary Glitterish type of music. It was Thompson Twinish kind of thing. So I think again, Korn, don't really care. Motorhead, maybe because they've been around so long. Blink 182, Motley Crue. I can make an argument with them because they're still relevant. Motley Crue, we're still talking about them. I mean,
they were in the news last week because it was Vince Neil's plane that the landing gear failed landing in Scottsdale. Vince was not on the plane, but a person was killed in that accident. And that's the first time I've heard Motley Crue in a while. That I can't remember what the name of the book was, but I read excerpts from the Motley Crue book, and the things those guys pulled were just unbelievable.
It really was. I mean, it was, and then sprinkling a little Pamela Anderson. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, death. They defied death. Tommy Lee. I mean, oh my God.
How are those guys still living?
Same way the Rolling Stones are. I don't know if they're doing yoga in their off time or not, but I think they've all gotten old enough now where they've kind of straightened out a little bit. I'm not saying they're not still drinking and partying. Yeah. At some point, you know, it's cool to drink and smoke and do all these things and look at porn and all these things when you're in your 20s.
So if I start now, I can live to be like 150.
Yeah, you'd be climbing coconut trees, snorting your dad's ashes is what you'll be doing. And then Thin Lizzy. Who, of course, is a band that, our good friend Damon Johnson was in Thin Lizzy. He was in a band called Black Star Riders, which was a reincarnation of Thin Lizzy. If you go back, Thin Lizzy, and to this day, when they go to Europe, they sell out. If they come here, they may sell 500, 600 tickets. I don't know. But when they do Europe, they're huge in Europe. So I was trying to think about some other bands, and I had to go back, and I'm trying to think of a genre of music that hasn't been really well represented in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame yet. So we've got rock and roll, we got classic rock, heavy metal. We've kind of grunge that. The grunge rock, certainly Nirvana's in. We've had several of those. Women of music. We got the Go-Go's in now. We've broached that area, which I think is important. Dolly Parton got in. Country standpoint, of course, Beyonce, she could come in now as a country. She could come in as a country and a pop artist. And I'm thinking to myself, and I was thinking of you, and I thought, okay, Jackson Brown's in, right?
Yep.
James Taylor's in.
Mm-hmm.
But what about England Dan and John Ford Coley?
They had a couple major hits.
They did. They had 6 top 10 hits. I did some research this morning. I've been looking this up.
Yep.
They've had more hits than a lot of people that got into the Rock and Roll of Fame, but I'm thinking to myself, England and John. Now, again, it's not one of those things where, you know, I had to look it up. Because I used to be a huge John Ford Coley fan. I used to just love their music. I was in a lot of church things, and we did Love Is the Answer and the whole nine, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Traveling Wilburys, Bob Dylan, Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, George Harrison, Roy Orbison, all 5 of those individuals are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame already with their bands or solo. George is in as a Beatle and a solo, but they're not in as a band, and they've only made 3 albums. And I'm thinking to myself, if you got everybody in the band in the Hall of Fame and they put together a band, shouldn't that band be in something? I'm sure if you go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, there's got to be something about super groups or super groups. The Traveling Wilburys. What about Dan Fogelberg?
Dan Fogelberg absolutely needs to be in the Hall of Fame. It's an absolute travesty if he's not yet. And I did read recently he's not. And I mean, he was a mega performer, had just a whole series of hits and extremely popular albums, and just one of the really pure voices and musical talents. His guitar playing, Tony, was really underrated. He was as good a picker as anybody I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a good friend of mine, Jeff Tyler, who used to play a lot of my gigs, and I'd always request a Hard to Say, which was one of his top 10 hits. And I love that song. And he said, I can't. And I'd say, why? And he goes, I can't play it. And I said, really?
Yep.
And he goes,
so hard.
He said, that is one of the hardest songs I've ever played. And I said, really? That acoustic Hard to Say? He goes, that is such an incredibly difficult song. And of course, it's got some background noises there from who sings back up in that? Glenn Frey. Glenn Frey sings back up in Hard to Say. So I was like,
that's amazing.
Yeah. And I was really surprised. I had to go back and look to make sure. What America? How the hell is America not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
They have got to be in. You talk about a popular band that just had.
No one's saying anything. No one's saying anything about America. And I didn't see one site this morning saying that America should be in. America is huge. Huge.
Absolutely. And they had to have had 7 or 8 number ones.
They had a ton. I mean, they were so relevant in the 70s and 80s and even the late 60s at one point.
I saw them probably right about the time I got out of high school, and they were phenomenal.
And again, I'm throwing out some bands here on 10. Some people they go, Pablo Cruz. Why would you be saying Pablo Cruz? I think there's this contingency of yacht rock stuff, and there was just a yacht rock documentary that came out several months ago. If you get a chance to go watch it on Netflix, it's fantastic. It is really, really good. It's got Christopher Cross in it, and you may have been the one to tell me about it. It's really, really good. I finally caught it a couple weeks ago. It is really good.
Really good.
And Pablo Cruz is one of those bands again. Now they were down, I think they're out 16, 17 years, had 5 or 6 albums. Never were that, not glam band, but they were just kind of were a backup, kind of background band. But man, their music was just so good. They had so many great songs. Little River Band.
Oh man, they made a pretty good splash, no pun intended. But Hall of Fame, I'd have to think about that. But they were very prominent in their time as well.
Happy Anniversary, remember that song? Happy Anniversary, and Reminiscing. They had some pretty big songs.
They did.
What about, here's one, and I can't believe it because I hear this song all the time, and I hate this song. And it's a great song. It's a great song. I just don't like it, okay? Maybe it's because we had to play it so much. The song Africa from Toto drives me crazy. I don't understand what but what about Toto? They're still together. They're still playing. They won, best record of the year. They won best song of the year. I mean, they've been around forever. And the crazy thing about Toto is everyone in their band has played with everybody else.
Yep. Africa was a mega hit. It's a song that I think was maybe a little underappreciated in its time. Something happened recently where there was discussion about Africa and Toto. I can't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, I think they definitely deserve strong consideration. If not for anything else, just that one song was so big and continues to be big.
Yeah, it really is. I was trying to look up something here while I was doing this, but what about Michael McDonald?
Yeah, I think as a solo and as in his band career, another guy that really deserves some strong consideration. I would say yes.
I would say yes, just because first of all, his voice is unbelievable. I still can't believe he can sing the way he does, but that's and when he speaks that high pitched voice. Not all the time, but most of the time. And you hear him sing, you're like, how's he still doing that? I saw him with the Doobie Brothers out at the Oakmont Amphitheater last summer. It was one of the best concerts I've ever seen. And I really wanted to see him with the band. I wanted to see the Doobies. And it was amazing because, when he came on board, the Doobies took off. I mean, they were already big. Tom Johnson's guys, they were already big. They had, China Grove and all those great songs, Long Train Running and stuff. But then when Michael came in, It Keeps You Running. He just, What a Fool Believes. It took the band, and first of all, it made the band sound different, but they just took off. And so when he was up there, I didn't know if they were going to do like the Doobie Brothers and then Michael McDonald and then play them together, or because Michael had a ton of solo hits too, and he did a lot of stuff with Kenny Loggins. Did stuff with Glenn Fry. He did stuff with Steely Dan. He did stuff. He did so many backup things, but he sat in the corner. They recognized everyone in the band. They recognized him last. And it wasn't like everyone was just waiting for everyone to announce him. He was just one of the guys. He was just in the band, and you could tell that he really enjoyed taking that. He didn't want to be looked upon or have a bright light on him that night. Now he sang his ass off. That guy could sing. But it was unbelievable. And it's funny because we're putting in, we got 14 nominees here, and you can nominate as many as you want. It doesn't mean they're all getting in. And I do wonder, in 10 years, what are we going to be putting in the Rock and Roll of Fame? I don't know. I don't even listen to a lot of bands of the 2000s. And I wonder how much of the hip hop stuff's going to be included in that. I can't even name a band now. P. Diddy going to be in if he's not in prison? Is Kendrick Lamar, who just played the halftime show, is he going to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Will he have had his first album at least 25 years old? I'm just looking at some of the bands that started in 2000 and up, and I couldn't vote. I couldn't vote because I don't know enough of that music. It's not that I don't want to listen to it.
Yep.
So I don't know what happens at that point. I will say this: if you get a chance, to go to the Rock and Roll of Fame, I would love to take you up there. That's kind of my bucket list thing for Keefer and Kurre. I'd love to take you up there. They have a studio up there where we could do a show from up there. And I know,
cool.
I know the program director. I know the whole fit up there. So we could do a week of shows up there. You could do all your stuff on ABC 33, 40. You could do a Jocks hit. You could do whatever you wanted to do, but you can do it all from the studio up there. And it's a pretty amazing setup. And it's right there on the 5th floor.
Nice.
But it's one of those things where, as a rock and roll connoisseur, you owe it to yourself to at least go one time. And again, it's like an amusement park. You go, make sure you spend 2 or 3 days there because you'll miss something.
Oh, yeah.
It's super cool. So, well, thank you for kind of filling me in. Any other thoughts on the Rock and Roll of Fame you want to throw out there before we let her rip?
Let me ask you a question. A band that just came to mind with that discussion. Is Marshall Tucker in the Hall of Fame?
Marshall Tucker's not in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, outrageous.
Yeah.
The Caldwell brothers and Marshall Tucker were amazing live. I'm telling you, the instrument range and the sounds they've made, they should be in the Hall of Fame. Them and Dan Fogelberg is an outrage. I'm gonna become a campaigner for those two.
I am with you. I'm looking up. There was a trivia question. I wanted to have a little piece of rock and roll trivia that I was going to throw at you every time we did music, and I could not find that piece of trivia. So I'll have it for you next time.
All right.
We'll have a little piece of trivia so you can learn something.
If it's Final Jeopardy, I'll bet it all.
as you should, my friend. All right, ABC 3340. We'll do it again this weekend. Monster weekend in college hoops. Alabama goes down to Auburn. Some fun.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's, again, you think about that home court advantage, and there was a weird sense that Alabama wasn't ready for that game just because the line was 1.5. Normally home court advantage.
Well, and basketball is a fundamental game. You've got to put the biscuit in the basket. They shot 5 for 26 from 3, Tony. I could go out there right now and make 4 for 26, my skills have completely deteriorated. So you can't shoot that poorly. And I know you'll remember this because we did the K4 Win show on Friday, and you asked the question, which coach right now do you think is best positioned for this game? And I said Bruce Pearl, and my son went crazy because he loves Nate Oates. Mm-hmm. But my point was, I think Auburn is a more oiled machine right now. Alabama's a little bit erratic. Alabama can be the most devastating force in all of college basketball, but they can have these spells where they're not really hitting their shots. And, it just seems like they're not as, I think I used the word button down the other day as Auburn. I think Bruce Pearl has his team better positioned for ultimate success. And that's not, I love the way Alabama plays. That's the way basketball is intended to be played. Get the ball, get it out of there, get to the other end before the defense can set up. That's my kind of basketball, but you got to make your shots.
Well, the truth of the matter is you just nailed it. 5 of 26. If they go 8 of 26, they're still shooting 27%, but they're right in the ball game. They're losing by 1 or 2 points. It only takes 2 or 3 more shots. If you're going to put the ball up 30 times at 3-point land, missing it 3 or 4 more times is 12 points. I mean,
and that's their game.
Make the difference. And so, we were kind of going around circle because we have 4K wins. Go to our site, 4kwins.com. We do a gambling show, which, by the way, is taken off as well. Everything's taken off here at Tony Kurre Radio. And a lot of it has to do with Kip. And of course, all of our gambling stuff is fantastic. I had someone stopped me at church yesterday and he said, you need to stop talking about all those gambling shows you do. And then he said, who do you like this weekend?
Yeah.
He said, we're taking off for Biloxi later on tonight. And I said, you damn Catholics. I know how you guys work.
For Catholics to be worried about gambling is hilarious. I grew up in a Catholic home, and my dad was as big a player as you'll ever see, and it's ridiculous, especially in this day and age. It's no different than investing in land speculation or playing the stock market. It's putting up money to try to make money. What difference to make what the enterprise is that discouraged? Yeah, can I not go buy some stocks today?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want, man. It's just a different type of gambling, right? Hey, listen, and for all you knuckleheads out there that do March Madness, you're gambling, by the way. You're doing. You are. Go ask Rick Neuheisel if that's gambling. Remember, he was the one who did the $20,000 bracket and lost his job because of it. So
he crushed it. Let me just tell you, if you get on 459, you're gambling.
You are, and you got nothing to show for it. No. That's the sad thing.
And you can only come up a loser. I guess a winner if you get to your destination.
Thank you, my man. I'll catch you with you next week.
All right, Tony. Thanks.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.